My name is Victoria Bennett. I'm 32 years old and the current CEO of Elevate Marketing Solutions, one of the fastest-growing marketing firms in the country. From the outside looking in, my life appears to be a picture of success, a woman who broke through the glass ceiling through sheer determination and talent. But appearances can be deceiving. Behind every success story lies an untold journey, and mine is paved with rejection, favoritism, and the constant struggle for validation. This is the story of growing up in the shadow of my brother, Michael, who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes, while I could seemingly do nothing right. I'm not sharing this for sympathy. I'm sharing it because after 30 years of suffering and silence, the truth finally came to light. And sometimes, the truth is the only thing that can set an entire family free from the web of lies they've woven around themselves. Victoria, why can't you be more like your brother? This question haunted my childhood like a persistent echo. From the moment I was born, I was measuring up against Michael, and always falling short. He was 5 years older, the firstborn, the golden child. The son my father had always wanted. I remember my 6th birthday. Mom had promised a small party with a few friends from school. I'd been talking about it for weeks, planning games and dreaming about the chocolate cake with strawberry filling I'd requested. The morning of my birthday arrived, and I bounded down the stairs, excited for the day ahead. "Mom, when are we setting up for my party?" I asked, practically bouncing with anticipation. My mother looked up from her coffee, confusion etched across her face. "Oh honey, I'm sorry. Michael has a basketball championship today. We'll have to do something next weekend instead." There was no party the next weekend either. Or the weekend after that. Eventually I stopped asking. That same year, Michael received a new bike for getting straight A's. I later got straight A's too, but my achievement was met with a casual, "That's nice, dear," and nothing more. No bike. No celebration. It was simply expected of me. While Michael's accomplishments were events worthy of commemoration. When I was 10 and Michael 15, my parents decided he needed to expand his horizons. Dad enrolled him in an expensive summer camp for gifted students in Vermont. It was a prestigious program that focused on science and leadership. "Dad, can I go to camp too?" I asked, holding the brochure I'd found on the kitchen counter. My father barely looked up from his newspaper. "Victoria, that camp costs a fortune. Besides, you don't need camp. You can stay with Aunt Martha for the summer." Aunt Martha lived in a small apartment, had 3 cats, and smelled perpetually of mothballs. She believed children should be neither seen nor heard. I spent that summer mostly alone, reading books in her stuffy spare room while Michael sent postcards describing swimming competitions, science experiments, and new friends. When school started again, I won first place in the district science fair with a project on renewable energy sources that I'd worked on all by myself in Aunt Martha's apartment. My parents attended the ceremony only because it was held on a night when Michael didn't have any activities. "Nice job," my father said perfunctorily, before turning his attention to Michael. "Hey Mike, isn't this the field you were interested in at camp? Maybe you could give Victoria some pointers for next year." Michael had never shown any interest in science. But facts rarely mattered when it came to exalting my brother. When I was 13, something happened that crystallized the dynamic in our family. I had been selected to represent my school in a regional debate competition. It was a big deal. Only 2 students from each school were chosen, and I had worked tirelessly to prepare. The night before the competition, I was practicing my arguments in my room when I heard raised voices downstairs. Curious, I crept to the top of the stairs to listen. "I'm telling you, Linda, I didn't do it." Michael's voice, defensive and slightly slurred. "The principal called us himself, Michael. They found alcohol in your locker." My mother's voice was strained. "It wasn't mine. Someone must have planted it there." My father's deep voice cut in. "Son, it doesn't matter. What matters is that this could affect your college applications. We need to handle this carefully." I froze on the stairs. Michael was in serious trouble. Yet my parents seemed more concerned about protecting his reputation than addressing the actual issue. The next morning I came downstairs ready for my debate competition, my notes organized in my folder. "Victoria," my mother said, not quite meeting my eyes, "your father and I need to go to a meeting at Michael's school this morning. It's important." "But my debate competition," I stammered. "It starts at 9 a.m. You promised you'd drive me. Take the bus, my father said dismissively. Or call a friend's parent. This is an emergency. This is important to me, I protested, feeling tears well up. I've been preparing for months. Oh, for God's sake, Victoria, my father snapped. Your brother's future is at stake here. Stop being so selfish. Selfish? The word hung in the air between us. Somehow, wanting my parents to fulfill their promise to me, to support me in one of the few things I'd ever asked of them, made me selfish. I took the bus to the competition. I performed well but missed placing in the top 3 by a single point. When I got home, no one asked how it went. The family was celebrating because my father had sorted everything out with the school and Michael's record would remain unblemished. That night, I cried myself to sleep, wondering what it would take for my parents to see me as worthy of even a fraction of the attention they lavished on my brother. As high school ended, the disparities between Michael's treatment and mine became even more pronounced. Michael had struggled academically in his final years of high school, barely maintaining AC average despite my parents hiring expensive tutors and giving him every advantage. Despite this, when it came time for college applications, my parents spared no expense. They hired a college consultant, paid for SAT prep courses, and even flew him to visit campuses across the country. It's an investment in his future, my father would say. Meanwhile, I graduated as valedictorian of my class. My SAT scores were in the top percentile, and I had a portfolio of extracurricular activities that I built on my own: debate team captain, editor of the school newspaper, volunteer work at the local literacy center. Columbia, Michael announced one day at dinner, waving an acceptance letter. They loved my essay about overcoming adversity. The irony wasn't lost on me, but I held my tongue as my parents erupted in celebration. My father opened a bottle of champagne, and my mother actually cried with joy. 2 weeks later, my own acceptance letter arrived from Harvard. I had also been offered a partial scholarship based on academic merit. Harvard? That's quite far away, was my mother's tepid response. And expensive, my father added. Even with that scholarship, we can't afford to send both you and Michael to elite schools. He's already committed to Columbia. But I began. Victoria, my father cut me off, your brother needs this opportunity more than you do. You're smart. You'll succeed anywhere. Michael needs the connections and prestige of Columbia to get ahead. The message was clear, my accomplishments were expected, while Michael's mediocrity needed to be rewarded and bolstered. I ended up attending the state university on a full scholarship I secured myself. I studied business and marketing, throwing myself into my education because it was the one area of my life I could control. Michael, meanwhile, barely scraped through his first year at Columbia, calling home regularly for more money and support. The summer after my sophomore year of college, I was working 2 jobs to save money for an apartment off campus. I had been taking the bus to both jobs, often spending hours each day commuting. One evening, as I dragged myself home after a double shift, I found my parents and Michael in the driveway, gathered around a sleek new Audi. Surprise, my mother called out when she saw me. Look what your father got for Michael's graduation gift. Graduation gift. Michael had barely graduated, taking 5.5 years to complete a 4-year degree in communications. Meanwhile, I was on track to graduate early with honors while working and paying for most of my own expenses. Isn't it awesome, Vic? Michael grinned, running his hand along the car's glossy exterior. Dad said I needed something reliable for interviews. I looked at my father, who was beaming with pride. A car, for graduation, I said slowly. Now, Victoria, my mother began, sensing my tone, your brother needs to make a good impression when he starts job hunting. Appearances matter in the business world. And what about when I graduate next year? I asked. Will I get an Audi too? My father's expression hardened. Your brother is starting his career in New York City. He needs to project success. And I don't. I challenged. Don't be dramatic, Victoria, my father dismissed. You've always been more practical. Besides, you said yourself you wanted to be independent. I had never felt more invisible than in that moment, standing in the shadow of my brother's unearned luxury while the calluses on my feet throbbed from standing for 12 hours straight. That night, as I soaked my aching feet in my tiny dorm room, I made a decision. I would never again expect fairness or recognition from my parents. If I wanted something in this life, I would get it myself. After graduating summa cum laude, I landed a position at a small but innovative marketing firm in Boston. The pay was modest, but it offered tremendous growth potential, and I was excited about the creative freedom. Michael, meanwhile, had been job hunting in New York for over a year, living in an apartment our parents had purchased for him in Brooklyn. He claimed to be interviewing at prestigious law firms despite having no law degree or relevant experience. At a family dinner celebrating my parents' anniversary, Michael announced that he had finally landed a position at Andrews and Whitmore, one of the top legal consultation firms in Manhattan. Associate legal consultant, he declared proudly. The starting salary is modest, but the partner track is very promising. My parents were ecstatic. We always knew you'd find your path, my father said, clapping him on the shoulder. Something about the way Michael avoided eye contact with me triggered my suspicion. After dinner, I cornered him in the kitchen. Andrews and Whitmore? I asked. I've never heard of them. You wouldn't have, he replied dismissively. It's a very exclusive firm. What exactly does an associate legal consultant do when you don't have a law degree? I pressed. Michael's face flushed. It's complicated. I wouldn't expect you to understand the intricacies of the legal world. I didn't push further, but I made a mental note to look into this mysterious firm. It took only a few searches and phone calls to discover that Andrews and Whitmore didn't exist. Further digging revealed that Michael was actually working at a call center for a credit card company, handling customer complaints for barely above minimum wage. When I confronted him privately, he broke down. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, he hissed. Dad expects me to be this huge success. Do you know what he'd say if he knew I was just some nobody answering phones? Maybe it's time for honesty, I suggested. Easy for you to say, he spat. You've always been the smart one. They expect me to be successful without even trying. If they find out I'm a failure, they'll cut me off, and I need that apartment. The irony was almost too much to bear. While I had been denied opportunities and support at every turn, Michael had been suffocating under the weight of impossible expectations and unearned privileges. I decided to keep his secret for the time being. Not for his sake, but because I was beginning to formulate a plan. The truth would come out, but on my terms when I was ready. While Michael was living in his parent-provided apartment and lying about his career, I was channeling every ounce of my energy into my work. I quickly rose through the ranks at the marketing firm, taking on challenging projects and consistently exceeding expectations. By 27, I was the youngest vice president in the company's history. My campaigns had attracted several high-profile clients, and my innovative approach to digital marketing was starting to get noticed industry-wide. My parents' reaction to my success was tepid at best. Marketing, my father would say dismissively. It's not a real profession like law or medicine. Anyone can make advertisements. This from the man who believed Michael was some kind of legal genius despite all evidence to the contrary. At family gatherings, the conversation would inevitably center around Michael's fictional legal career. He had fabricated an entire professional life, complete with imaginary colleagues and cases. My parents lapped it up, proudly telling relatives about their son's meteoric rise in the legal world. When asked about me, they would offer a vague, "Victoria's doing well too," before quickly changing the subject. The constant dismissal of my achievements stung, but I had learned to find validation elsewhere, in my work, my growing professional reputation, and the close friends who actually saw and appreciated my value. At 29, I was approached by a headhunter regarding a position at Elevate Marketing Solutions, one of the most innovative firms in the industry. They were looking for someone to head their East Coast division, based in New York. The position would mean a significant salary increase, greater creative control, and the chance to work with some of the biggest brands in the world. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. When I mentioned the potential move to New York during a family dinner, my mother's immediate response was, "That's wonderful. You'll be close to Michael." Not "Congratulations on this amazing opportunity," or "We're so proud of your achievements." No, my potential move was valuable only as it related to my brother. "Maybe Michael could help you find an apartment," my father suggested. "He knows all the best neighborhoods." I bit my tongue, knowing that Michael had barely left his Brooklyn apartment in years except to go to his call center job. "Actually," I said calmly, "the position comes with a housing allowance. I've already been looking at places in Manhattan." My father frowned. "Manhattan is very expensive, Victoria. Don't be foolish with money. Michael's neighborhood is perfectly nice." I took a deep breath. "Dad, I'll be making enough to afford Manhattan. The position is for Executive Director of East Coast Operations." For a brief moment, I saw something flicker in my father's eyes, surprise, perhaps even a grudging respect. But then Michael cleared his throat. "Speaking of career news," he interjected, "I've been approached about a partner track at the firm. They said it's unprecedented for someone my age." And just like that, the moment was gone. My parents turned to Michael, lavishing him with praise for his fictional accomplishment while my very real achievement was forgotten. That night, I accepted the position with Elevate. I didn't tell my parents until after I had signed the contract and secured an apartment in a luxury building overlooking Central Park, one that made Michael's parent-funded Brooklyn apartment look like the modest accommodation it was. 6 months into my new position, my parents decided to visit New York. They planned to stay with Michael but wanted to stop by my place for dinner one evening. When they arrived at my building, their expressions were priceless. The doorman, the marble lobby, the private elevator to my floor, none of it fit their perception of their practical daughter who they believed would succeed anywhere. "This is quite nice," my mother said stiffly as she surveyed my spacious living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the Manhattan skyline. "Victoria," my father began awkwardly, "we had no idea your job paid so well." "Marketing can be quite lucrative, Dad," I replied coolly. "Especially when you're good at it." The dinner I had prepared was met with grudging approval, but the conversation inevitably turned to Michael. "Your brother is doing so well," my mother gushed. "He's being considered for a major case, something to do with international law." I took a sip of my wine, considering my next words carefully. For years I had kept Michael's secret, partly out of pity and partly because exposing him meant confronting the painful reality of our family's dysfunction. But sitting in my hard-earned apartment, listening to my parents praise achievements that didn't exist while minimizing my real ones, something inside me snapped. "Is he?" I asked. "That's interesting because international law is quite specialized. Most firms have dedicated departments for that." My father frowned. "Well, Michael's always been exceptional. What's the name of this case?" I pressed. "I have a client in international business who might be interested." Michael shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I can't discuss the details, Victoria. Confidentiality and all that." Of course I nodded, reaching for my phone. "But you can at least tell me which court it's being filed in, right? Federal cases are public record." "Victoria," my mother intervened, "this is an appropriate dinner conversation." "Actually," I said, looking directly at Michael, "I think it's long overdue. Would you like to tell them, or should I?" The color drained from Michael's face. "Vic, please." "Tell us what?" my father demanded. I took a deep breath. Michael isn't a lawyer. He doesn't work at a prestigious law firm. He works at a call center for Credit Secure, handling customer complaints about interest rates and late fees. The silence that followed was deafening. "That's ridiculous," my father finally sputtered. "Michael has been at Andrews and Whitmore for years." "Andrews and Whitmore doesn't exist, Dad," I said gently. "You can search for it right now if you don't believe me." My mother turned to Michael, her expression pleading. "Tell her she's wrong, Michael." But Michael couldn't meet her eyes. After a moment's hesitation, he slumped in his chair. "I tried to tell you," he mumbled. "I tried to tell you I wasn't cut out for the high-powered legal world. But you never listened. You've been lying to us for years." My father's voice was dangerously quiet. "You never gave me a choice." Michael suddenly shouted. "It was always Michael the prodigy, Michael the future success. You pushed and pushed until I had to lie just to meet your expectations. We gave you everything," my mother whispered, tears streaming down her face. "The best schools, the best opportunities." "No," I interjected, unable to remain silent any longer. "You gave him everything. You gave him every advantage, every opportunity, every bit of support and encouragement, while I had to fight for every scrap of recognition." My father turned to me, his expression thunderous. "That's not true. We treated you both the same." I laughed a hollow sound. "Dad, you bought him a car for barely graduating after 5.5 years. You bought him an apartment in Brooklyn. You paid for his education at Columbia. What did I get? The privilege of taking the bus to my state university where I paid my own way on scholarship. You were always more independent," my mother protested weakly. "I was independent because I had to be." I retorted. "Do you know why I succeeded? Not because of your support, but despite the lack of it. Every achievement I've ever had has been met with indifference or immediately overshadowed by some fictional accomplishment of Michael's." My father's face reddened. "That's enough, Victoria. Your brother." "No, Dad," I cut him off. "It's been enough for 30 years. I've had enough of the favoritism, enough of the double standards, enough of being invisible in my own family." I stood up, my hands trembling slightly. "I want you to look around this apartment. Look at what I've built for myself. I am the executive director of one of the top marketing firms in the country. I earned every bit of this success without your help or, frankly, your belief in me. I turned to Michael. And you could have been honest. You could have found your own path instead of living this lie. But you chose the easy way, taking their money and their praise for achievements that never existed. The room fell silent again. My mother was openly crying now, and my father seemed to have aged 10 years in the span of minutes. Finally, Michael spoke. She's right, he said quietly. About all of it. That dinner was 3 years ago. The aftermath wasn't pretty. My parents left in shock, and Michael disappeared for weeks, ignoring their calls and texts. Eventually, we all had to face the truth that had been buried beneath years of favoritism and lies. My parents sought family therapy, though my father only attended under duress. Michael finally admitted that he had been desperately unhappy for years, crushed under the weight of expectations he could never fulfill. As for me, I was promoted to CEO of Elevate Marketing Solutions last year. Under my leadership, the company has expanded into 3 new markets and increased revenue by 40%. I recently purchased a weekend home in the Hamptons with cash. My relationship with my parents remains complicated. My mother has made genuine efforts to understand the damage they caused, while my father struggles to accept his role in our family's dysfunction. Some wounds take longer to heal than others. Michael and I have found a fragile new foundation for our relationship. Without our parents' favoritism poisoning the well, we've discovered we actually have some things in common. He's returned to school to study graphic design, something he genuinely enjoys and shows talent for. I've even hired him as a freelancer for some of our smaller projects. The truth is, we were both victims of our parents' warped perception, he as the golden child who could never fail, and I as the afterthought who could never truly succeed in their eyes. Sometimes I wonder what might have been different if my parents had distributed their love and support equally. But then I remember that adversity shaped me into the woman I am today, resilient, self-sufficient, and unwilling to accept less than I deserve. If there's any lesson in my story, it's this: true validation comes from within. When the world or your family fails to see your worth, you must be the one to recognize it. Build your success brick by brick, and eventually you'll construct a truth that no one can deny, even those who've been blind to it all along.